Today is Monday, January 27th, and for our school, today is actually the start of semester 2, aka quarter 3. So I did technically switch from small engines to welding now first period, but we're still trying to finish up the engines because parts tree has been very delayed on our orders recently. But today's agricultural fact of the day pertains to a bill that has been introduced. I'm very excited about this, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. And if you've had kids in school that have consumed school lunches, I'm sure you will understand and appreciate this bill as well. A bipartisan bill from both chambers of Congress, referred to as Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act, would bring whole milk back to schools. Since 2010, public schools have only been offering fat-free options, a policy based on flawed, outdated science, which have proven to be non-palatable to children. Pulling all varieties of milk containing fat in 2010 was pioneered by Michelle Obama with the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act. In order for students to benefit from the nutritional content of milk, they must actually consume the milk, which has not been occurring since the changes in 2010. Now, I'm not saying that all children are not consuming the skim milk options that are provided in schools. However, a lot of kids that I teach 8th through 12th grade, and they have complained about it on a regular basis since 2010. Now, there were options in our vending machine at the old school that I used to teach at. We were allowed to operate the vending machine with Intense milk. We sold Upstate Niagara milk, and it was the Intense pint. So you had chocolate or vanilla or cappuccino or mint. You had the seasonal flavors. So for those of you that are local to my area, you are probably familiar with those. However, those had a high sugar content and also an incredibly high calorie content, and they were part of the phasing out process of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act. So by the time 2015 rolled around, those were no longer an option, and they were never included in school lunches. So when these were all implemented, the only options that kids had were skim milk, and many of the children described it as tasting like chalk. This is one of those soapboxes that I can get up on and talk about for hours. And I understand, for those of you that are not familiar, the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act was a way to attempt mitigating the obesity epidemic that has been occurring in our country. So they felt that whoever, Michelle Obama delegated all of that science-based information to, they felt that by taking the fat out of milk in school lunches and by making school lunches healthier, there were other changes that were implemented too. It wasn't just the fat in the milk, but things like providing only whole wheat-based products when kids were eating pizza, which if you've had kids in a public school and they've eaten school lunches on a regular basis, I know I myself, when I was in school, and this was in the early 2000s, I lived off of pizza. Like every day for lunch, that's what I would get. And in circumstances like that, they obviously attempted to make everything healthier when they were doing this Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act. I do remember there being heavy restrictions on things that kids could purchase. Or that they were provided cheese on a chicken wrap or ketchup with chicken nuggets. Like they were counting calories with what seemed to be everything. And one example that I used in my class earlier, I had some egg shop boys that would come down to the vending machine that we operated for those 2 years before that was pulled from the schools. And they weren't getting enough from the school lunches because they had restricted the calories in them, not taking into account that kids have all different caloric needs. You can't say that this amount is good for everyone. I had 3 sport varsity athletes coming down and buying 3 milks out of those vending machines a day, adding up to between 1,500 and 1,600 calories just in milk alone. But they did that because the school lunches weren't providing them enough and they didn't feel full. They needed more. And when those implementations were finally put in place and we had to take the milk out of the vending machine, there were restrictions on what could be sold. Obviously, you could sell bottled water, but things that were allowed were Propel flavored water, no calories, no sugar, artificial sweeteners. Your sports drinks, the ones that didn't have calories and no sugar, those were allowed. These restrictions were so insane to me that I did a lot of research on it. And Monster Zeros actually met that requirement. Obviously, I couldn't sell them, but it all came down to the calories in that drink and what the sugar content was in it. There was nothing else that regulation in particular was really based on, and the rules changed depending on the age or grade level that had access to that vending machine. So in the high school, we could sell those things that I just mentioned. In the middle school, we were a little bit more restricted on what was actually allowed. But back to this fact, and I don't know what the scientific evidence was that they originally based this off of, but I feel like it's a well-known thing that fat in milk does help with brain development in younger children. So by only providing skim milk options, are we really doing good things for our students? And this information, the information on this bill was pulled from agdaily.com, which is where I get a lot of my current information if I'm looking for like what has happened new in ag in the last couple of days. But one of the things that they stated in that article was, obviously, if kids aren't consuming it, because with the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, they're like, oh yeah, kids will still consume the milk. They just will consume the milk without the fat. But part of the nutrients that they were banking on those kids getting from milk are fat-soluble vitamins. So if they're not consuming the fat, their body isn't going to be able to process those nutrients that you claim they're getting from drinking skim milk. And the entire reasoning with this Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, we're trying to limit the obesity in our children. And instead of actually looking at and assessing our families as a whole, they went after the school lunch, where a lot of these kids are getting their only meals of the day at school. This also included breakfast. So many kids get breakfast at school now. And by changing these regulations, that may have been the only option for some of those kids to get their stomachs full. Or we have children that live more sedentary lifestyles. Less kids are doing sports than they were 10 or 15, 20 years ago. And instead of actually trying to address the root of the problem, they went at the milk in the school lunches. And yes, drinking skim versus full fat will reduce the amount of calories that an individual is taking in. And I understand that, but there is a whole lot more at play aside from what the schools are providing. I'm interested to see how long it takes for this to go through. And personally, from my standpoint, I asked the kids that were in that class, do you get school lunches? Yes, they do. And they're forced to take that skim milk. And I said, do you drink it? Nope. Literally money in the garbage because those kids won't drink it. They prefer water over skim milk. And I know that it's been like that for years because every year this comes up in my class and every year those kids' responses are the same. And I've had that skim milk that they give in school lunches. I wouldn't drink it either. There are exceptions to this rule that I do need to add because some schools are able to fund their meal programs by themselves and don't rely on government funding. But many schools that have subsidized lunches, free and reduced, they have to abide by the regulations that are put in place, such as the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. So in your lower income districts, whether it's a rural or urban or anywhere in between type of school, if they are not able to self-fund their meal programs, they have to abide by those federal regulations to a T. And not here, but at my previous place of employment, I know that some of those cafeteria managers were very strict about that. And if you were in violation, they were going to blow you in. So some schools kind of looked the other way. If an FFA program or whoever had a vending machine that they were operating and it had milk in it, they would look the other way and like just ignore that it existed so that the kids still had access to it. But some schools were very strict about that. But anyway, I'm off that soapbox. I hope you learned something today.